That is the old topic in the old video today. Why would I talk about such a topic when I barely ever talk about current events on this channel? Well, as a human being, I am not particularly a great big fan of war. In fact, in my experience, it is a terrible thing. Um, there really isn't a war I can say, wow, that was great, even if the outcome was for the side I'm rooting for, in the sense of, well, if we don't win this war, we're all dead. Right? There are various wars that have affected me directly, just as there are to many, millions of people around the world. And I can say, at least in my experience, not only is it just an unpleasant and ugly and terrible thing, that humanity would be better off if that was an activity that we no longer participated in as a whole, at all. Of course, I know there will be people who say, well, what if we discover aggressive aliens one day from another planet? We need to know how to protect ourselves. How will we do that if we completely forget the art of war? Let me just say, humans having been around for hundreds of thousands of years and having been fighting since the very beginning, like all animals fight, it is highly unlikely that we will be forgetting the art of war anytime soon. Even if there was some universal decree that every person in the world signed onto today that we're going to stop fighting, and we all actually honored that decree. It would take hundreds of thousands of years, or at the very least tens of thousands of years, if not hundreds of thousands of years, for humanity to forget its warring ways. Part of the reason for that is, of course, the trauma that we have all been ingrained with psychologically. And yes, you can quickly, through one or two or three generations, change culture and behavior and everything else, but also some things resonate in a more profound way over time, especially when they do things like when people learn history, right? Learn about their culture, learn about their past. Right? A lot of that stays with people. So even if we stopped fighting, well, it's not like human beings would not know how to defend themselves in the future. So my take is that war is bad. Now, I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer, duh. But the thing is, you might think it's a no-brainer, but guess what? There's a lot of people who don't agree with that. And when I say a lot of people, I mean there are many millions of people, quite possibly billions of people, who don't agree with that. And the strangest thing is that it's never the actual people at the lower level of societies that get to decide whether or not a country is at war, or a tribe, or whatever, right? It's always the leaders of said nation, tribe, country, whatever. It's always the leaders who decide. And it's always the people at the lower end who have to go and do the fighting. So, the great irony there is that war is a thing that works against the interest of the people who have to do the warring. War usually works very much in the interest of those who lead the people into and out of war. So what to do about it, right? How can you end a war? What are the ways to stop a war? Well, first things first, the most logical way to stop a war is actually with math. What do I mean by that? Well, there are usually a host of statistics involved in war. Or as General Patton once said, the idea of war is to kill more of the other bastards than the kill of yours. And it's a very brutal and sad and disturbing statistic, but it's true. The idea of war is to kill more of the other side's people than they kill of yours. And that's terrifying and horrible. And by the way, it's not just the killing, right? There's all kinds of other things that happen. There's no shortage of other brutal activity that happens in a war. So those statistics add up. And the more they add up, the more a decent, normal society will tend to say, okay, enough, and demand a change, and demand an end to the war in a way that is good for the society. And usually what that means is the side that is losing will put their hands up and surrender. And then the activities will end. Now, does it mean that I think that there are no wars in the world that are justified? Of course, there are some wars in the world that have been and are justified. Does that mean that their end should not be sought out as quickly as possible? Of course they should. You know, it's our duty as human beings. Well, it's not our duty to do anything. If you want to take it up to a certain level of philosophy, you could say we have no obligations, including surviving and replicating, even though biologically that is the entire purpose of life, right? To survive and replicate. Nevertheless, if you want to take that biological responsibility out of the picture and say, okay, we have absolutely no responsibilities, we can do whatever we want. Okay. Well then, if people want to be complete nihilists and entirely not care about whether or not they survive, they're welcome to stepping off the ledge. And that leaves the rest of us who feel that there is some natural inclination or society-based, endemic inclination that has become endemic because it's been taught through so many generations that we as people seek to end violence. The problem is that there are way too many people who do not agree with that sentiment. Right? They thirst for violence and bloodshed. They literally pray about it every day. It's quite literally their ideology. There are entire nations that feel this way. Sad and disgusting as it is. Like they wake up in the morning praying to harm other people. And they go to bed at night praying to harm other people. And the entire time between the time they wake up and they go to sleep, they're praying to harm other people. Even as they're doing entirely different things. Right? Even medical doctors who are helping people in those societies are very often praying to harm other people. And it just so happens that the other people they're praying to harm very typically are members of one or a few very specific groups of people on the planet who are all too often scapegoated just for being who they are. So, how to stop a war? Like I said, it starts with math. I know. You'll say it starts with emotions, or a public call for peace, or protest, or a demonstration. But it doesn't. It starts with understanding math. And it starts with, very often, the losing side accepting that they can't win. Right? And if the warring sides are in a battle where the winning side isn't actually trying to eliminate every last living person of the losing side, then the losing side has no reason, ultimately, not to surrender. Okay, it's different if the winning side is trying to literally wipe out the entire population of the losing side. Then the losing side may have no choice but to fight until the very last man, woman, or child. Right? They may be literally faced with a choice of fight to the death or fight to the death, or be slaughtered if they don't. So there are reasons why people don't just want to stop a war. But in any sane society, or in any society where the prospect of ending the war means actually the death and destruction will stop, then that's what people should seek. Unfortunately, sometimes wars continue for a long time because they're basically in a stalemate, and there will be no winner or loser, very clearly, because they can just keep fighting forever, and they have basically equal amounts of arms and resources. But then there are cases where the fighting will just continue for a long time because even though there's one side that's clearly, outnumbered in terms of firepower, maybe even manpower, the side that's losing, might be very dangerous zealots who are not willing to surrender at any cost, even if it means their entire society will be destroyed, or huge numbers of their people will be harmed or killed. And that's a terrible fact. A very terrible fact about some of the things we see today. So, even as we face these very real and sad things happening in the world that we live in, it's important to remember there usually comes a time when these things end. In fact, historically, they all do. But it can be quite a long time. And it's terrible for all sides involved. Which is why the sooner people comprehend math better and the statistics involved, the sooner they are to make the right decision about those things. So, the education required is serious if one wants to truly stop a war. Peace.